So I also wanted you to kind of deep dive on how the investment committee operates because you're a part of it, right? And as a founder, I'm very curious in terms of how does the investment committee together discuss and evaluate, and how do they contribute different perspectives when they're looking at a deal. So what goes behind after the presentation in terms of how are investors thinking? What is the kind of time that they dedicate to this discussion? When do they make a decision? Is there like a framework, or is it more like 100% conversational where they weed out a deal and figure out if this is a good bet or not? So if you could just shed some light from your experience as somebody who's been a part of an investment committee.
So, if I were to tell you what goes inside IC discussion room is typically a lot of brainstorming.
Right.
It's very very rarely is it free flow conversation. Most of the time, it is a lot of brainstorming, disagreements between the members. Uh, from our fund perspective, we have two levels of IC. First is when we have shortlisted a deal to kind of go ahead, do all the groundwork, do all the business diligence, etc., get going. So before that, the deal is kind of passed through an IC, and only when the IC gives an in principle that okay, this is something that we should look at, that's when we can start it on the deal. Now, what goes around into that IC discussion, that one is not like very tedious or very difficult one, not something that I am never worried about. So there we are basically looking at basic stress test data points around the business in terms of how capital efficient it is, what's the competition like. We do a couple of rep checks from customers to kind of put that feedback. Founder pedigree. We have kind of to kind of streamline that. We have built an internal tool ourselves called Yoda AI.
Okay.
So Yoda AI looks at a company across 18 different parameters. Again, most of what people would do themselves, but we have kind of just taken the human intervention out, human bias away from the decision making. So Yoda AI would look at whether the business is linear growth or exponential growth, how many founders, founder pedigree, their background system, their skills, the business construct, B2B, B2C, how capital intensive the business is going to be, CAC to LTV constructs, category, around a lot of data around the category and the industry in India and globally, and then a little bit on who the current round investors are, who's the lead investor, what is the current cap table look like, are there people who would really add value to the company, or there are a lot of startups which have raised money randomly from a lot of platforms, say the LVs and the VCats of the world, right? And typically any company who on their cap table has 4 platforms is already destined to disaster.
Okay.
So, these are companies where which 99% of the times get rejected by the IC because of this very reason. So yeah, I mean that's what goes around in the pre diligence IC, and once the diligence is done, that IC discussion is far more tedious.
Right.
And what happens is the IC has three constant members: me, Abhay, Rajni. One member is going to be the person who's leading that deal, so that's the 4th member, and we typically have one more person from outside who would be either an investor from in the fund, or someone who's not invested in the fund but is subject matter expert, someone we know well, someone we have worked with in the past. So could be someone from one of our public market portfolio companies also. For example, if we are looking at a healthcare company in the VC space, then we may get some support from Apollo Hospital, which is a large listed portfolio company in our public market. So that's how our post diligence IC is structured, and typically it's the candidate who's leading the deal, making a presentation to the entire IC. Which is very detailed, has LDDs, FDDs, and all the business diligence. And then there are a lot of intense questions that are asked by the members, and then it's a voting, and that we take care. But most of the time, the final IC that happens, very rarely a deal is rejected in the final IC. I mean, we have had 2 rejections in the so 10% of the times the deal rejection. So we've invested in 18 companies. So we've had 2 rejections in the final IC. And most of the time these rejections also will be around one common reason, which is a lot of founders don't pay too much attention to the financial aspect of the business. And
Right.
we are very fussed about this. So one thing in my thesis is that we need a evolved finance professional in the company. Most of the companies that are $10 million plus valuation, we insist on having a financial controller, because we have seen this from our experience. If you have a very good financial controller / CFO, the job of a founder becomes much easier to focus on building the business.
Right.
And a lot of founders don't get this. So the 2 rejections that we have had so far have been because of this simple reason that the founder could not explain to us in clarity about booking, billing, collection, if it is a SaaS company. So, and how is this entire thing structured between finance, ops, and sales?
Yeah.
So that's what the IC looks like.
Great. So I'm going to now move on to the last question for the day. I wanted to know your thoughts on the VC fellowship. I think you've taken a session for us. What do you think about hiring processes in general, or folks who actually want to break into VCs? Do you think an initiative like this could actually help them? And any advice that you'd want to share with the fellows and the people who are watching this?
So yes, I think as we discussed, I think this is what Shaurya you started with, right? That it's a very small ecosystem, and in that ecosystem, rightfully so, a lot of young professionals are very focused towards deal sourcing and deal closure, right?
Yeah.
But there's a big gap between the two, which is diligence, which is understanding the business, and that's something that is a skill that is missing in a lot of VC professionals right now. So I think from the VC fellowship perspective also, and from anyone who's listening this, if you are aspiring to be a VC professional, focus a lot on reading. Focus a lot on reading, not just about India. We are like a very small country in a very large world.
Right.
So don't be too obsessed about India, but read a lot about what's happening in the developed world. I mean, for example, if we're looking at digital ad frauds, if we're looking at genomics, gene sequencing, etc., we don't have too much in India to do right now. But there are listed companies in this space in US.
Right.
So you can imagine these companies have been around for 7-8 years at least.
Correct.
So yeah, I mean, from a VC fellowship perspective, I think you guys have created a very good curriculum, and the fact that you've got insiders from the ecosystem to be training, I think, and I'm very sure that it will add a lot of value to professionals. But with this program, my bigger piece of advice will always be read more, because I mean, that's essentially, if you look at it, the best and the biggest investor in the world, Warren Buffett, says that he reads 14 hours a day. So, and if I read, let's say, if I were to read for example, Dr. Velumani, who's the founder of Thyrocare, if I were to read his biography or his journey of building Thyrocare, then I can learn in 10 hours what took him 20 years to build.
Right.
I can learn how he thinks. I can learn how Thyrocare became a disruptor in an already very competitive industry. And this is not just about Thyrocare. I mean, there are a lot more books and magazines about the good, bad, ugly.
Right.
So my advice, again, you guys have done a good job in identifying this problem. So there is definitely a problem that there are not. There is a very small pool of very good candidates when it comes to VC hiring, and this kind of a program, I think. For you guys also, it should be a thought. You should extend it not just to aspiring VC professionals, but there should be a program for existing young VC professionals also to be able to have that, to go from being an associate to a deal lead kind of role. And that will be more around business analysis, business research, business diligence. So yeah, I mean, I would want to end my long monologue with this simple thought that, look, how do you become a good investor, whether VC or not VC? How do you become a good investor is from how much you read, how much information you are able to take, absorb, retain, and then make your decisions.
Right.
Because there will always be good businesses, but there will always be a peer to those good businesses somewhere in the world. So if you have read about it, you will be able to connect it. So that would be my final piece of advice to everyone in the investing ecosystem, whether public or whether private. And every business has a different way of doing valuation.
Yeah.
For example, I was interviewing someone yesterday for our public market research. This candidate happened to be looking at an listed asset management company. I asked him about his views. He instantly started with saying that, look, 50p multiple is very expensive. It should trade at 30p multiple. I said, boss, at least tell me what the business is like. Jump to P multiple very later, yaar. And unfortunately, asset management companies are never valued on P multiple. They are either valued on a percentage of their AUM if they are very large, age-old traditional low-yield asset management companies. If they are private equity kind of asset managers, and if these kind of businesses are listed, they are valued at a multiple of their NAV. So that's how these businesses are valued. Now, if you haven't read about these businesses globally, if you haven't read about how a BlackRock is valued or how a Blackstone is valued for that matter, then it will be very difficult for you to value an asset management company in India, or for that matter, value a broking business in India. If you haven't looked at Interactive Brokers in US, how will you make a valuation model for grow in India? So I think that's my piece of advice. Read a lot about West and China, because you already have developed stories there. So read a lot about them. Spend at least an hour or two in your day reading about businesses, transactions globally. It does not necessarily mean you only read about startups. There are large listed businesses that you should be reading about. I think that should be an important part of any VC or for that matter, any investing professional candidates day.
Right. Makes sense. Great. Thank you so much, Ajay, for your time. Really got a lot of insights myself from the discussion that we've had. So I think it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast, and looking forward to have you over here again. Probably, get to learn a lot more things from you through these discussions.
No, thank you. I think you brought out a lot of my thoughts also. I mean, I only at the end of this conversation I realized that okay, I also need to go back to reading 2 hours a day of global content. So yeah, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I only hope that it adds value to someone who is watching this. But again, it was a pleasure to have such a free flow conversation. Look forward to doing something like this again with you guys.